Warning: the content in these videos is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. We do not condone or promote any of the actions depicted or described. These stories are presented to educate the public and share true events. Some material may be disturbing or inappropriate for certain audiences. We do not recommend that children watch these videos without direct adult supervision. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. True Crime Guide. They were young, hungry for the kind of story that only a mountain can give you. A challenge, a map, a line on a horizon. In January 1959, a group of 9 students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute left Sverdlovsk, today called Ekaterinburg, to follow a winter route into the northern Urals. They were experienced skiers, hikers, cross-country warriors used to cold and hardship. Their leader was a man named Igor Dyatlov. One of their number, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to illness, a decision that would later save his life. He would say that leaving the group felt like a wrong turn he could never forgive himself for. The rest pressed on toward a ridge the Mansi people called Kolatsiakal, the Dead Mountain. Winter in the Urals is a different kind of night. The air is thin and hard. Snow sits like glass on slopes, and the wind sharpens lonely thoughts until they break. The students pitched their tent on a slope near the end of January, intending to reach Mount Otorten and return by mid-February. They never made it back. When their expected return date passed, families reported them missing. What followed was a search that would unfold in fragments, like a photograph torn into pieces and scattered across a frozen landscape. When the first searchers reached the site in late February, they found the group's tent partially buried in snow, cut open from the inside. The scene didn't look like an ordinary camp abandoned because of weather. It looked like a place where people had fled in panic. Footprints trailed away from the tent, not the steady, deliberate marks of hikers returning to shelter, but irregular steps left by people in socks, bare feet, or light slippers. Inside, their gear was undisturbed. Outside, the tracks disappeared toward the tree line below the slope. The first 2 bodies were found about 1.5 kilometers from the tent, near a cedar tree at the edge of the forest. They were barefoot and dressed lightly, as if they had run from the tent and tried to build a fire for warmth. 3 more bodies were later found between the cedar and the tent, frozen in the snow, as if they had collapsed while trying to return. Weeks later, in May, searchers discovered the final 4 bodies buried beneath 4 to 5 meters of snow in a nearby ravine. These 4 had sustained massive internal injuries, skull fractures and crushed ribs, the kind of trauma more typical of a car crash than a fall. Yet their skin showed no external wounds. 2 garments from these victims also showed elevated traces of radioactivity. The autopsies offered 2 categories of death: hypothermia and fatal internal trauma. And the official Soviet conclusion, faced with evidence that defied easy logic, listed the cause as a compelling natural force. That phrase did not satisfy anyone. Families wanted answers. Investigators, limited by Soviet secrecy and bureaucracy, provided few. The tent had been slashed from within. The group had fled half-dressed into a -30 night. Some died huddled around a small fire beneath the cedar. Others died crushed in a ravine. How could one night produce both slow freezing and instantaneous devastating impact? That contradiction has haunted the story for more than 60 years. The names of the 9 are not just names on a list. They were friends at the cusp of life, students, engineers, dreamers. The idea that they had simply been overwhelmed by an avalanche felt too simple and too sorrowful. Many details didn't fit the avalanche hypothesis. The tent wasn't buried, the slope wasn't steep enough for a large slide, and if an avalanche had struck, why would they have cut their way out instead of digging up and sheltering inside? And yet, panic explains many things. In recent years, avalanche simulations and forensic reconstructions have suggested that a slab avalanche, a sudden, localized block of snow detaching from the slope, could account for much of what happened. Such an event might have partially collapsed the tent, injuring some and terrifying others into fleeing. Hypothermia could explain the paradoxical undressing, and falling snow or debris might have caused the internal injuries later found on the ravine victims. Still, not everyone believes nature alone is responsible. Some have pointed to the area's military testing during the Soviet era, missile trials, parachute mines, or secret experiments that could explain the injuries and the traces of radiation. Witnesses in nearby settlements reported strange lights in the sky around the same time. If something classified had occurred, it might have been easier to blame natural forces than admit military error. Another theory, infrasound, suggests that wind sweeping over the mountain's shape could create low-frequency vibrations known as a Kármán vortex street. Such sounds can induce panic, disorientation, or feelings of dread. Some scientists propose that the hikers, overwhelmed by this physiological terror, might have fled the tent irrationally. And beyond these grounded explanations, the Dyatlov Pass tragedy has drawn every manner of myth. Secret weapons, government cover-ups, cryptid attacks, even UFO encounters. Mystery breeds myth, and the Dyatlov Pass refuses to give anyone closure. The case has been reopened multiple times. In 2019, after renewed scrutiny and modern snow modeling, Russia's investigative committee reaffirmed the slab avalanche theory. They concluded that the group likely fled after a partial collapse of the tent, became separated in the storm, and died in stages. The first 5 of hypothermia, the final 4 from injuries caused by snow and debris in the ravine. For some, that answer feels like peace. For others, it feels like an official script meant to quiet the noise. Even among experts, debate continues. The amount of pressure needed to shatter ribs and skulls still seems disproportionate to what a small avalanche could produce. So the mountain keeps its secret. The Mansi name, Kolat-Syakhl, Dead Mountain, has become a prophecy and a pilgrimage. Travelers hike to the site now, retracing the group's final steps with reverence and morbid curiosity. The wind still cuts across that ridge in winter, and snow still piles at angles that deceive and slide. But the Dyatlov Pass story is not only about snow, physics, or conspiracy. It is about 9 young lives that ended in darkness. There is a cruel tenderness in imagining their final hours. The tent slashed, the cold climbing in, the fire under the cedar burning low. Imagine trying to fold your hands around warmth and failing. Imagine Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back, carrying that knowledge for the rest of his life. True crime often feeds on the macabre. But this story is more than that. It asks why we explore and what we risk when we seek beauty in indifference. It asks how we live with mystery, how we bear grief without answers. If you stand at the pass now and listen, you'll hear only wind and the crunch of snow. The mountain keeps its geometry and its silence. The files have been opened and closed again, the arguments replayed, the autopsies reread. Theories will rise and fade. But perhaps the only truth that remains is the simplest and most unbearable. 9 friends went into the mountains and never came home. Whatever the cause, avalanche, experiment, or fear, that night left behind small traces. A tent torn open, a line of footprints that fade into white, a scarf wrapped around an arm. Those fragments are what we hold to remember them not as puzzles, but as people. The Dyatlov Pass incident will continue to live at the crossroads of science, myth, and elegy, an unsolved story that mirrors our own need to make sense of the senseless. The mountain keeps that silence like something sacred, cold, absolute, and unrelenting. Thanks for watching True Crime Guide. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. If there's a story you'd like us to cover, drop it in the comments below. Your favorite case may just be next. Until next time, stay curious and stay cautious.